Commander Vex of the Corthani Empire had seen many things in his 3 centuries of life. He had witnessed the fall of star systems, the birth of new civilizations, and the collapse of supposedly invincible armadas. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the sight before him now. The human female stood barely 5.5 feet tall. Her uniform was regulation grey with simple stripes indicating the rank of lieutenant colonel. No fancy decorations, no ceremonial weapons, no intimidating cybernetic enhancements. Just a small, unremarkable creature with brown hair tied back in what humans called a ponytail and eyes that seemed perpetually amused by some private joke. "This is your champion," Vex asked, his forearms spreading wide in disbelief. "This is the legendary warrior who single-handedly destroyed the Zephyrian death fleet." The human diplomats shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Hayes cleared his throat. "Commander Vex, may I present Lieutenant Colonel Maya Torres of the Human Defense Corps?" Torres stepped forward with a casual salute that looked more like she was swatting away an annoying insect. "Nice to meet you, Commander. Love what you've done with the place." She gestured around the pristine white meeting chamber aboard the Corthani flagship. "Very clean. Must take forever to get bloodstains out of this carpeting." Vex's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion or irritation. "You mock our hospitality." "Oh no, not at all." Torres grinned. "I'm just wondering if you have a good dry cleaner recommendation. Things tend to get messy when I'm around." The other Corthani officers exchanged glances. General Thrak, Vex's second-in-command, leaned forward. His massive frame dwarfed even Vex, standing nearly 8 feet tall with natural armor plating that had deflected plasma fire for decades. "Human," Thrak rumbled, his voice like grinding stone, "we have heard tales of your species' supposed prowess in battle. But looking at you," he paused, studying Torres like she was a particularly disappointing appetizer. "Are you certain you are the correct representative?" Torres tilted her head. "Well, let's see. 5'6", brown hair, tendency to make inappropriate jokes during formal occasions. Sounds like me. Though I should mention my driver's license says 5'7", but we all know government documents lie." "This cannot be correct," Admiral Zix interjected, her 6 eyes blinking in rapid succession. "The report spoke of a warrior who reduced the Zephyrian homeworld to ash, a destroyer of fleets, a bringer of death and destruction. Yeah, I get that a lot." Torres examined her fingernails with apparent fascination. "You know, you'd think after the first few dozen species call you that the novelty would wear off. But nope, still gives me the warm fuzzies." Vex stood slowly, his imposing 9-foot frame casting a shadow over the human. "Lieutenant Colonel Torres, forgive our skepticism, but your appearance does not match your reputation. Perhaps you could demonstrate your capabilities." The request hung in the air like a challenge. The human diplomats looked nervous. Ambassador Hayes stepped forward. "Commander, I don't think that's neck." "Oh, it's fine," Torres interrupted, waving Hayes back. "I love show and tell. What did you have in mind, Commander?" "Arm wrestling." "Trivia contest?" "Interpretive dance battle." "Combat simulation," Thrak said immediately. "Our best warriors against you. Full contact, weapons permitted." Torres laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both musical and slightly unhinged. "Full contact? Weapons? Oh, you sweet summer child." She looked around the room at the assembled alien officers. "How attached are you to this ship?" "What do you mean?" Vex demanded. "I mean," Torres said, still smiling that unsettling smile, "the last time someone asked for a combat demonstration, I accidentally vaporized their entire training facility, and the mountain it was built on, and the small moon orbiting nearby. Insurance was a nightmare." The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Finally, Admiral Zix spoke. "You jest." "Do I?" Torres raised an eyebrow. "Tell you what, let's start small. How about I just show you a little party trick?" Before anyone could object, Torres reached into a pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a simple metal sphere, no larger than a marble. She held it up between her thumb and forefinger. "This," she said conversationally, "is what we humans call a pocket nuke." Not very creative naming, I admit, but we're practical people. It's only got about a quarter kiloton yield, perfect for urban renewal projects or removing stubborn stains. Every alien in the room took an involuntary step backward. Thrak's hand moved to his sidearm. "Relax, big guy," Torres said, noticing the movement. "The safety's on, probably. These things are notoriously finicky. Sometimes they go off if you look at them wrong. Other times they just sit there like expensive paperweights. Quality control in human weapons manufacturing isn't what it used to be. You carry nuclear devices as casual armaments." Vex's voice had risen to what could charitably be called a squeak. "Oh, this little thing? This is just for emergencies. You should see what I keep in my locker back on the ship." Torres tossed the sphere casually from one hand to the other, causing another collective flinch from her audience. "I've got enough firepower in there to sterilize a small continent, or a large space station, depending on atmospheric conditions and prevailing winds." She paused in her juggling to study their faces. "You know, you all look a little pale. Well, paler than usual. Do any of your species get motion sickness? Because this is nothing compared to the fun stuff." General Thrak found his voice first. "The Zephyrian Death Fleet. Tell us how you destroyed it." "Oh, that old thing." Torres shrugged and pocketed the sphere, much to everyone's relief. "That was actually kind of boring. They sent, what, 300 ships? All lined up in perfect formation, just begging for a coordinated strike." 300 ships, Admiral Zix repeated faintly. "The most powerful fleet in known space." "If you say so." Torres seemed genuinely unimpressed. "I mean, they had pretty good shielding, I'll give them that. Took almost 30 seconds to punch through, and their weapons were decent. Definitely stung when they hit." "Stung?" Vex leaned forward. "Their plasma cannons could melt through a mile of solid titanium." "Yeah, they put a few holes in my jacket. I was pretty annoyed about that. It was my favorite jacket. Had this nice leather patch on the elbow and everything." Torres' expression darkened slightly. "I may have overreacted a bit." "Overreacted how?" Thrak asked, though he seemed to dread the answer. Torres brightened again. "Well, I figured if they wanted to play with big guns, I'd show them what a really big gun looked like. So I fired up the main cannon." "What type of weapon system?" "Oh, you know, standard human equipment. Antimatter accelerator with a gravitational lens focus array. Nothing fancy. We call it the Planet Cracker, but that's mostly for marketing purposes. It's actually only cracked 2 planets. The rest it just completely vaporized." The aliens exchanged horrified glances. Vex cleared his throat. "And this weapon, it destroyed the entire fleet?" "Well, the first shot got about half of them. Direct hit on their command ship, which apparently had some kind of chain reaction set up with the others. Pretty fireworks, actually. Lots of purple and gold explosions. Very artistic. And the other half." Torres' grin turned predatory. "They tried to run. That's when things got interesting." "Interesting how?" Admiral Zix whispered. "Well, I couldn't just let them leave, could I? They'd seen our capabilities. Loose lips sink ships and all that. So I switched to the pursuit mode weapons. Quantum torpedoes mostly, self-guided, faster than light. With just enough AI to be vindictive, but not enough to file a complaint with the ethics committee." "Quantum torpedoes," Thrak repeated numbly. "Each one packs about the same punch as a small star going supernova. We usually save them for special occasions, but I figured a death fleet qualified. Took about 15 minutes to hunt down all the runners. The last few tried to hide in an asteroid field. Which was actually pretty clever. Too bad the torpedoes don't really care about obstacles. They destroyed the asteroids as well. asteroids, 3 small moons, and a gas giant that happened to be in the neighborhood. The shockwave reached the outer system and scrambled some satellite networks, but no major damage. Well, except for the Zephyrian mining colony on the 4th planet. They got evacuated, mostly. Mostly. Vex's voice was barely audible. I think a few of them were in the bathroom when the evacuation order came through. These things happen in war. Torres shrugged philosophically. At least it was quick. Instantaneous, really. 1 second they're there, next second they're part of the expanding plasma cloud. Very efficient. The silence that followed was profound. Several of the alien officers were now sitting down, looking distinctly unwell. Ambassador Hayes looked like he wanted to crawl under the conference table. Finally, Commander Vex found his voice. Lieutenant Colonel Torres, how exactly did you achieve your current rank? Torres pointed toward the nearest viewport, which showed a distant star system. See that burned-out husk where the Zephyrian homeworld used to be? All eyes turned to follow her gesture. In the distance, barely visible, was a slowly expanding cloud of debris and radiation where once a thriving planet had orbited. I did that on a Tuesday, Torres said cheerfully. Promotion ceremony was the following Friday. Funny how paperwork moves so much faster after you accidentally genocide an entire aggressive species. Accidentally? Admiral Zik squeaked. Well, mostly accidentally. I was aiming for their military installations, but it turns out their planet had an unstable core. Who builds a homeworld on an unstable core? That's just poor urban planning. When the first antimatter torpedo hit, the whole thing went up like a Roman candle. Torres paused thoughtfully. Although, to be fair, they did ask for it. I mean, they declared war on humanity with a formal challenge to single combat. Their champion versus our champion, winner takes all. They just didn't specify that our champion would show up with enough firepower to sterilize half the galaxy. Single combat, General Thrax said slowly. You consider planetary bombardment to be single combat. Hey, I was the only human there. That makes it single combat by definition. Not my fault they brought friends. Torres' smile turned absolutely feral. Besides, they cheated first. Their champion turned out to be a moon-sized battle station with a population of 50 million warriors. So I figured, fair's fair. Commander Vex sat down heavily. And this is typical human military doctrine. Oh no, not at all, Torres said, looking shocked. This was actually pretty restrained for us. I didn't use any of the really nasty weapons. No reality bombs, no temporal disruptors, no consciousness-eating nanites. Just good old-fashioned antimatter and quantum physics. Reality bombs, Admiral Zix whispered. Yeah, those are fun. They basically convince local space-time that it doesn't exist anymore. Very clean, very thorough. Leaves a perfect sphere of absolutely nothing. We've only used them twice, and both times were accidents. Well, mostly accidents. Ambassador Hayes finally found his voice. Colonel Torres, perhaps we should. Oh, we're just getting to the good part, Torres interrupted. You want to know about my promotion? This is where it gets really interesting. She turned back to the alien officers, who were now looking at her with expressions ranging from terror to morbid fascination. See, after the Zephyrian incident, High Command decided they needed someone with experience handling delicate situations. So they gave me a promotion and a new assignment. Diplomatic relations with potentially hostile alien species. They put you in charge of diplomacy? Vex's voice cracked. I know, right? Me, diplomatic. It's like putting a nuclear warhead in charge of customer service. But apparently my methods are effective. We haven't had a single species declare war on humanity since I got this job. That's reassuring. Thrak ventured. Oh, it is. Turns out most civilizations become remarkably peaceful once they understand what humanity considers a proportionate response to aggression. It's all about setting expectations. Torres walked over to the viewport and gazed out at the debris field that had once been a solar system. You know what the funny thing is? I didn't even want to be in the military. I was studying xenobiology in college when the draft started. Figured I'd spend my service time cataloging alien plant samples or something peaceful like that. What changed? Admiral Zix asked, seemingly unable to help herself. First contact went badly. Very badly. The Rigelian Empire decided humanity looked like a tasty snack and sent a conquest fleet. Unfortunately for them, they attacked during my final exams. Torres' reflection in the viewport showed that unsettling smile again. I was already stressed about organic chemistry, and then these tentacled nightmares showed up demanding our surrender. Bad timing on their part. What happened to the Rigelian Empire? Well, let's just say there's a reason nobody mentions them anymore. Turns out, when you're really angry about missing your final exams, you tend to overclock your weapons systems. And when you overclock human weapons systems, interesting things happen to local physics. The room fell silent again. Outside the viewport, the debris field continued its slow expansion, a testament to the consequences of underestimating humanity's newest diplomatic representative. Commander Vex was beginning to suspect that his career had taken a very wrong turn somewhere. Perhaps it was when he'd volunteered for first contact duties. Perhaps it was when he'd agreed to host this diplomatic meeting. Or perhaps it was 30 seconds ago when he'd asked about the human's military background. "Commander," Admiral Zix said quietly, "I believe we may have made an error in judgment." "You think?" Torres overheard, turning from the viewport with that perpetual grin. What gave it away? The casual mention of genocide or the pocket nuke I'm still carrying? General Thrak, who had been remarkably quiet since the reality bomb revelation, finally spoke up. "Human Torres, your species sent you here to discuss a mutual defense pact." "That's right." Torres clapped her hands together, causing several officers to flinch. "Sorry, got distracted by all the fear and trembling. It's very flattering, really. Most species don't take me seriously until after the demonstration." "What kind of demonstration?" Vex asked, then immediately regretted it. "Oh, you know, the usual. Target practice with a few uninhabited star systems. Showing off our new toys. Last month we tested our latest planet buster on a gas giant. Worked beautifully. The explosion was visible from 3 systems away. Ambassador Hayes buried his face in his hands. "Colonel, perhaps we could focus on the diplomatic aspects." Right. Diplomacy." Torres pulled out a small device that looked suspiciously like a detonator. "So, who wants to sign first?" The collective intake of breath was audible. Every weapon in the room was suddenly trained on the small human, though their owners seemed to realize the futility of the gesture. "Relax," Torres said, waving the device casually. "It's just a pen." Voice-activated, biometric locked, standard diplomatic equipment. She pressed a button, and a holographic contract appeared in the air. "See? Completely harmless. Unless you try to forge my signature. Then it gets explodey." "Explodey is not a word," Admiral Zix said weakly. "It is when you're describing human technology. We're very creative with our vocabulary. Almost as creative as we are with our weapons systems." Commander Vex studied the holographic contract floating before them. "These terms, they seem quite favorable to all parties involved." "Of course they are. We're not unreasonable." Torres scrolled through the document with casual efficiency. Standard mutual defense agreement. "You help us, we help you." Pretty straightforward. The only unusual clause is Section 12. Section 12? Thrak read aloud. "In the event of hostile action against any signatory, the Human Defense Corps reserves the right to deploy strategic response units as deemed appropriate by field commanders." "Strategic response units?" Vex inquired. "That would be me," Torres said cheerfully. "And people like me. We have about a dozen operators like myself scattered around human space. Each one capable of, well, you've seen what I can do. There are more of you." Admiral Zix's voice was barely a whisper. "Oh yeah, Marcus, he specializes in temporal warfare. Really nasty stuff. He once erased an entire invasion fleet from history. They never existed in the first place. Very clean, very thorough, and it doesn't mess up the timeline. Much. Torres continued scrolling through the contract. Then there's Elena. She does biological warfare, but the fun kind. Her specialty is turning enemy weapons against their users. Last conflict, she convinced an entire armada's worth of smart missiles that their targets were actually their launch platforms. The irony was delicious. And the others? Thrak asked, morbid curiosity overcoming common sense. Well, there's Jake. He handles psychological operations. He can drive entire civilizations insane just by broadcasting the right frequency patterns. Very effective, though the screaming does get annoying after a while. Torres paused thoughtfully. Oh, and Rebecca does dimensional warfare. She once banished an entire enemy fleet to a pocket universe where physics works backwards. They're still there, technically, still fighting a war they've already lost in a place that doesn't really exist. Dimensional warfare, Vex repeated numbly. Of course humans have dimensional warfare. We have everything, Commander. That's what makes us such excellent allies and such terrible enemies. Torres' smile turned predatory again. The choice is really quite simple. Sign the treaty and gain access to the most devastating military force in known space. Or don't sign it and, well, let's not explore that option. General Thrak leaned forward. Are you threatening us? Me? Threatening? Perish the thought. Torres looked genuinely offended. I'm simply pointing out the natural consequences of various diplomatic choices. For instance, if you were to refuse our generous offer of alliance, you'd be left to face the universe alone, without human protection. And why would we need human protection? Torres' expression became serious for the first time since the meeting began. Because there are things out there, General, that make the Zephyrian death fleet look like a children's toy. Things that would give even humanity pause. And those things are coming. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. What things? Admiral Zix asked. On the Devourers, ancient machines from the galaxy's core. They've been dormant for 50,000 years, but something's waking them up. Our long-range sensors detected movement 6 months ago. Massive constructs, each one the size of a small moon, heading outward from the galactic center. Torres walked back to the viewport, her casual demeanor replaced by something far more serious. They don't negotiate, they don't communicate, they just consume. Everything, matter, energy, information, life. They turn entire star systems into raw materials for more of themselves. How do you know all this? Vex demanded. It's because we fought them before. About 12,000 years ago, when humanity was still figuring out fire, they swept through this arm of the galaxy like a plague. The only reason any intelligent life survived was because they went dormant on their own. Something about resource optimization algorithms. Torres turned back to face the assembled aliens. But they're active again, and this time they're not going to stop until they've consumed everything. Every planet, every star, every scrap of matter in the galaxy. And you believe humanity can stop them? Thrak's skepticism was evident. I believe humanity is the only species crazy enough to try, and mean enough to succeed. Torres' grin returned, but it was different now. Colder, more focused. See, the thing about humans is that we don't just fight wars. We escalate them. Every conflict teaches us new ways to break physics and hurt people. We've been preparing for this rematch for a very long time. She pulled out another device, this one resembling a small crystal. This is a gravitational resonance scanner. It can detect Devourer movement patterns from up to 50 light-years away. We've been seeding them throughout the galaxy for the past century. You've been planning for this war for a century? Admiral Zix asked. Longer than that. Human military doctrine is based on two principles: overwhelming firepower and paranoid preparation. We've been building weapons specifically designed to fight the Devourers since we first learned they existed. Torres activated the scanner, and a three-dimensional map of local space appeared. Red dots marked Devourer positions, slowly but inexorably moving outward from the galactic core. They'll reach the outer rim colonies in about 18 months, the core worlds 6 months after that. Without coordinated resistance, every sapient species in the galaxy will be extinct within 5 years. The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Commander Vex spoke. "What do you need from us?" "Industrial capacity, mostly. Raw materials, manufacturing facilities, logistical support. We've got the weapons, but we need the infrastructure to deploy them galaxy-wide." Torres scrolled through another section of the contract. "In exchange, you get human military protection and access to our defensive technologies." "What kind of defensive technologies?" "Planetary shields that can stop a supernova, evacuation systems that can relocate entire populations in minutes, weapons platforms that can sterilize solar systems from a safe distance." Torres shrugged. "You know, the usual human overkill solutions." General Thrak studied the tactical display. "These Devourers, how many of them are there?" "Current count is approximately 50,000 active units, with more awakening every day. Each one is essentially a mobile factory capable of converting an entire star system into additional units within a few months." 50,000, Vex whispered. "How can anyone fight 50,000 planet-sized war machines?" "Very carefully and with a lot of explosives," Torres said matter-of-factly. "The good news is that humans specialize in fighting overwhelming odds. It's kind of our thing. The bad news is that even we can't guarantee victory without allies." Admiral Zix looked up from the contract. "If we sign this, what assurance do we have that humanity won't simply conquer us after the Devourers are defeated?" Torres laughed, a sound that managed to be both reassuring and terrifying. "Admiral, if we wanted to conquer you, we wouldn't need a treaty. We'd just show up and redecorate your homeworld with antimatter. The fact that we're here talking instead of shooting should tell you something about our intentions." "Which are?" "Survival, ours and yours. The Devourers don't discriminate between species. They'll consume human worlds just as readily as anyone else's. This isn't about conquest, it's about making sure there's still a galaxy left to argue about when this is over." Torres collapsed the holographic displays and faced the alien delegation. "Look, I know I've been a bit dramatic today. It's an occupational hazard. But the truth is, humanity needs allies. Not subjects, not conquered territories. Allies. People who can think for themselves, contribute their own strengths, and help us find solutions we might miss on our own." "And if we refuse?" Thrak asked. "Then you face the Devourers alone, and when they're done with you, they'll come for us anyway. The only difference is that we'll have fewer friends and fewer resources to work with." Torres shrugged. "Your choice, but I'd decide quickly. The enemy isn't going to wait for us to finish our diplomatic discussions." Commander Vex looked around the room at his fellow officers. Fear was evident in every face, but so was determination. These were warriors who had faced death before, even if they'd never faced anything quite like a human diplomat. "The Korthani Empire will sign your treaty," Vex said finally. "But we have conditions." "Name them." "First, human forces operating in our territory will respect local laws and customs. Second, we want access to human military advisors to help train our forces. Third, if humanity survives this war and decides to become conquest-minded afterward, we want guarantees of independence." Torres nodded seriously. "Acceptable. Standard diplomatic immunity applies to our forces, your people get full training packages, and the treaty includes a non-aggression clause that remains in effect for 50 years post-conflict. And what guarantee do we have that humans will honor that clause?" "The same guarantee you have that the sun will rise tomorrow," Torres said. "None whatsoever. But consider this, if we're evil enough to betray our allies after they help us save the galaxy, do you really think a piece of paper would stop us?" The logic was unassailable, if deeply unsettling. Admiral Zix stepped forward. "The Aquatic Federation will also sign." The mountain clans agree, General Thrak added. Torres smiled, and for the first time it seemed genuinely warm rather than predatory. Excellent. Now, let's talk about the fun stuff. Who wants to see our new prototype Star Killer? Star Killer? Vex asked faintly. Oh yes, we figured if we're going to fight moon-sized enemies, we needed moon-sized weapons. So we built some. Several, actually. They're quite impressive. Each one can punch a hole clean through a gas giant. Torres began walking toward the exit, still talking cheerfully. The targeting systems are a bit finicky, and there's some debate about whether the radiation signature violates 17 different galactic conventions on warfare, but they certainly make an impression. As the diplomatic party moved toward the door, Ambassador Hayes caught up with Torres. Colonel, was all of that really necessary? The threats? The casual mentions of genocide? The nuclear devices? Torres considered this. Probably not. But it was certainly efficient. Nothing motivates cooperation quite like existential terror. And the Devourers. Are they really coming? Torres stopped walking and looked back at the viewport, where the burned remnants of the Zephyrian system continued their eternal dance in the void. Ambassador, she said quietly, the Devourers are the least of our problems. What should really terrify everyone is what humanity is going to become by the time we're done fighting them. And with that cheerful thought, Lieutenant Colonel Maya Torres, diplomat and destroyer of worlds, led her new allies toward a future that would make the burning battlefield behind them look like a peaceful garden party. The galaxy would never be the same. But then again, it never was once humans got involved.